Hello everyone, welcome back. Timothy Long Blacksmithing again, this time with a video about a fun little element that we all know and love called lead. It is probably one of the most recognizable elements. As you can tell, it's pretty common. Most people pretty much recognize what lead is whenever they hear the name of it. It is sometimes erroneously associated with pencils, even though pencils are actually made of mostly just wood and graphite. Lead is element 82 on the periodic table of elements. It is commonly found as lead sulfide, as it is a chalcogen, much like copper and zinc. It has a melting temperature of 621 degrees Fahrenheit, or 327 Celsius for our friends across the pond. And in order for me to show you just how low of a melting temperature that is, let me show you guys a video of me melting lead real quick. So as you can see in this short clip, lead has a very low melting temperature. It doesn't even take me a minute to melt lead. As you guys will see, it just takes me lighting up the torch, and a couple seconds later, I've got myself a little metallic puddle. So, fun stuff, you know? It is almost like mercury. It is known for its density. It's up there with bismuth, not quite as dense as gold, and it's about half as dense as the densest element, which is osmium, which I might do a video on that one later, we will see. Hopefully one of these days I'll be rich enough to actually get a sample of osmium, but I digress. Some interesting things though about lead are that it is mostly a radioactive decay product. In fact, a lot of things decay into lead. Famously, uranium decays into lead through its decay chain. Lead is the first observationally stable element. Theoretically, they say that lead could actually be minorly radioactive, but they haven't actually observed any radioactive decay of lead, so it is stable for all purposes, realistically. If bismuth can be considered stable, even though it is technically radioactive, then lead is definitely stable. So no need to worry about that. But there are a few things you do need to worry about. We'll get to that later. For now, let's go into its uses. It started off being used, it started off in its widespread use in the classical era, with the Greeks and the Romans making wide use of it. They used it for projectiles, mainly from slings. And to this day, it is still used for high-speed projectiles, let's just say. The Romans actually used so much lead that they actually produced a pretty high amount of it. They produced about the same amount as was produced around the time of the Industrial Revolution. And when we combine that with the fact that lead was later used in paint, we can get a good idea of just the large scale of lead production that went on in the Roman Empire. It was a big deal. In their sling projectiles, they actually inscribed messages on it with a word that roughly translates to "take that" or "catch." I love the Greeks. Anyway, lead nowadays isn't used for nearly as much as it was back then. I mean, even back then it was used in pipes, which nowadays we would see as absolutely ludicrous. That's because we know much more about lead. Now we do alloy it with other things such as antimony. There is a lead alloy with 4% antimony used as a radiation shield. So it is still useful to this day despite many misgivings about it. And in addition to that, it is still used in high-speed projectiles. It is used as an alloying agent. It's used as a weight, or it is used in the production of weights. And it's also used in some forms of solder, although recently there has been a push to get lead out of solder, which I have to say, I agree with. If we could use tin solder, which melts at a lower temperature and is less toxic, yeah, I'd go for that in a heartbeat. So, as I mentioned, lead is a little bit more toxic. And by a little bit more toxic, I mean extremely toxic. It is up there with arsenic and mercury as far as how well known its toxicity is. It is famously toxic. In fact, there have been many scandals with the use of lead paint. Various public figures in the past have died as a result of, or at least lead was a contributing factor in their death. Exposure generally happens from places like lead paint, batteries, molten lead, which, fun for me, isn't it? I mean, there are obviously many places where one can get exposed to lead, but those are the primary sources by which one would be exposed to lead. Now, with lead paint, that can either be a result of proximity, sanding, multiple ways to ingest lead through lead paint, so it's generally a good idea to stay away from it. And generally, lead paints were a thing of the past, but it's still possible to find buildings that were painted with lead paint, so it is still a danger even to this day. And there's still some alloys with lead in them that we still gotta watch out for if we're melting them. For instance, some machine parts, even though there has been a recent push to get lead out of machine parts, especially here in my home state of California, there are still some alloys that do contain lead. In fact, even alloys that are lead-free still contain lead. 0.25% lead, but still leaded bronze. So, there are some things to look out for as it relates to lead and where it might be. Yeah, lead is so toxic, in fact, that it actually rates a 2 on the blue section of the fire diamond. If you don't know what that is, go on and look it up. It is a rather interesting thing, and it is definitely useful for knowing your safety stuff, so. Another way that lead is toxic, not just accumulating, but also just in its biological mechanisms, is it happens to mess with our calcium, iron, and zinc. It tends to replace those and cause a whole lot of issues. So, definitely a bad thing, and it can actually really mess with the brain, the bones, pretty much every organ in your body. And occasionally it'll even accumulate in the gums and teeth and, you know, all that good stuff. It is possible to neutralize, if you will, lead in the body. That is through chelation, which is pretty much the introduction of chemicals into the body to sort of grab onto the lead and prevent it from grabbing onto other stuff. Now, this is possible while the lead is still kind of floating around unoccupied, but this isn't a 100% cure for lead toxicity. For chronic lead toxicity, for long-term exposure, it's practically impossible to actually deal with it. So, lead is a very dangerous element to work with, and I have enough just in this tin alone. I say tin, but it's actually made of aluminum. But there is enough in this alone to seriously mess with people. So, I keep it stored in here. I'm 23. I got a lot of life ahead of me. Rather not mess it up with lead, so definitely keeping that one off to the side. Now that it's melted, I'm probably not going to touch it much. Just pretty much wanted to accumulate all of my lead into one spot, and yeah, just sort of have it in one convenient block. I don't really plan on doing a whole lot more with it other than just kind of keeping it around and saying, hey, look, I have a lead brick. If I get any more lead, I'll probably just throw that in with it, melt it down some more. Obviously, continue to use breathing apparati, and, yeah, you know, prevent that lead toxicity from getting to me. Also, melting it in a well-ventilated area, as you will see in the next episode. Oh, spoiler alert, I melt lead in the next episode. Now, before I go, I do have one more thing to share with you guys. Y'all have heard of Elf on the Shelf. Guess what you haven't heard of? Yep. That's right, y'all. Lead in the shed. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, leave a comment. If you have any future suggestions for videos, please do leave that in the comment section as well. So with that, thank you guys for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.